It's my high stakes review for week 10 on DraftKings, and we're starting right now. What's up, guys? Welcome to another video. Do me a favor and smash the like button before you forget. And if this is your first time here and you want to become a profitable DFS player and get better at betting, start now by subscribing to the channel, but make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything along the way.
I'm ready to go, hoping to get through this.
Yeah, man, I hear your dog in the background. He sounds pissed that you're on this stream right now, so hopefully we can make his day a little bit better. I need someone to make my day a little bit better. I had a really good week 9, and thought I was kind of through that little downswing in this GPP, and then I guess ran it right back with another really poor week. So anytime you pay all the way up for Saquon Barkley, you're probably drawing dead anyway. But it was a weekend cash games where, in particular on Fanduel, obviously there was maybe one, maybe two like lineups just based on the pricing over there. DraftKings felt kind of like the opposite. The pricing was extremely tight, so you had to make some pretty big time decisions. Obviously, we got the Damian Williams kind of news with McCoy being inactive. So there's a lot of things that we had to kind of piece our way through in the morning on Sunday morning. So I want to hear, before we even get started, I want to hear about FanDuel, because it did feel like I don't play as much on FanDuel, but I still build rosters over there each and every week. We do a FanDuel roster for the Fantasy Footballers DFS podcast. So I got kind of comfortable with roster construction, and then it seemed like there was like at least one or two plays at each position that were just like stone locks from the very start. So I want to talk a little bit about FanDuel before we jump into DK today.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, FanDuel, I know there was a lot of lineup sharing stuff going on Twitter, per usual. People just don't understand. Like, if people are sharing lineups, everybody's going to use the same lineup 100% of weeks. No, people don't do that.
That would be optimal, even if it was, right? Like, why would that?
Exactly. Like, I'm going to play what I think is the best lineup. I don't really care who has it and how many people have it. Like, I don't know how many people are going to have a lineup. Like, I looked in the 25-person double up. There is 20 people that had the same lineup as me. I've talked to 7 of them in my entire life.
Sure.
Another 13 I've never said a word to. Yesterday of the 20, I talked to like 3 or 4. And the thing is before the Damian news, I think everyone had different lineups. And then once the Damian news happened, everybody ended up very similar because of how everything landed. But yeah, like if you look at my main lineup yesterday, right? Everyone was playing Lamar because obviously he was an elite play. The running backs were pretty much set. You were playing David Montgomery on FanDuel. He was too cheap. By the way, let's never play David Montgomery again. He just doesn't.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that, my friend. We will get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that, I'm sure, with DraftKings. Then Damian was a lock, and then Michael Thomas was a lock, and Christian Kirk was a lock. So you had like 2 spots that were open, and one of them made most sense to play Kelsey. And then you're basically either Saquon or like Kamara. It's just, there's no decisions. It's basically you have like a player pool that turns into 11 players, and it's a 2v2. And it's not difficult to end up on a similar lineup, so that's just what ends up happening.
Well, I think the people that were complaining on Twitter or whatever it was, like, did they even look at your guys' lineup? I would imagine anyone building on FanDuel with a brain would have at least had that Sunday morning at some point. Like, that's how bad the pricing was. So, like, people were actually backing you guys up, being like, yeah, that was like a really popular build. Like, you know what I mean? So I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, it was actually interesting. More people were like, I just don't even interact anymore with people that talk about that stuff because they're just dumb.
Why
like,
bother?
It's not worth it. And if you read the terms of service and stuff, like it's pretty obvious where stuff is. But like, yeah, you end up going in a situation like that on Sunday morning. Like I said, I've not even talked to 13 of these people in my entire life. I don't even know who they are. So it's a situation where so many regs end up on the same lineup. But yeah, you look at it like, right, if you're sharing lineups with someone, if I'm giving you a lineup, Joe, you will never have a different lineup than me. If you have a different lineup than me one time out of 10, that means that you're not sharing a lineup with me because you wouldn't be able to get your own lineup in that situation because you'd be sharing. So if someone doesn't have the same lineup as you ever, that means you're probably not lineup sharing with them because of that reason. There's a whole nother scenario, though, where like people use complementary lineups. There's a whole different thing where you run 2 separate lineups that are very correspondent with each other, but you just want to have them different. That's a bit worse than people having the same lineup. Like, if you have 20 people with the same lineup, it's so negative EV for all 20 of those. That's what I was
just going to say. Like, people don't want to talk about this on weeks where there's some overlap and like the regs just get destroyed. Like, where were these people in like week 7, week 8? But I didn't want to cut you off earlier, but Pat Bain in the chat, 20 gifted subs. Are you kidding me, man? Thanks so much. I appreciate you, bro. Yeah, so let's move on to DraftKings. I think that let's start with your team though in particular. I think this week, obviously we're going to go through the game changer and my team, but I think starting with Cash, we did this last week, and I think it makes a little bit more sense. So so Sean, this is Sean's team in the $250 double up, just kind of where a lot of the sharp ownership is each and every week. So kind of what stood out to me right away about your team, Sean, David Montgomery, 78% owned in this tournament. I'm going to start muting you in between you talking, I think, because I can just hear your dog going nuts.
No, that's totally fair. I'll do it.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I think right off the bat, like we talked a little bit after I got off stream, to me at tight end, it was a week to kind of pay down. Like I didn't really consider paying up for Kelsey in this spot, just with how tight everything was and how, for me, Michael Thomas, Godwin, like those are guys that I was prioritizing at wide receiver. But you guys also know, like I wasn't just going to give up my running back equity as well. So Montgomery and Damian Williams, I recognize that was probably the optimal build because that's what got you to Michael Thomas. That's what got you to even some pretty decent mid-range wide receivers. But you also had enough salary to get up to Lamar at that point. So I opted to go with one of those cheap options. Thankfully chose right. Not that it mattered because I ended up just rolling a Saquon in my other running back slot. But I do think that Rhett Ellison was an interesting one. So I ended up playing early only for the first time this year as well. And kind of, I think there's one thing that I kind of did that I wish I wouldn't have this week. I fell in love with the team in roster construction earlier in the Sunday morning, before the Damian news broke, actually. And they were all 1 p.m. games. So I was like, oh, might as well just throw this team in the 1 p.m. only. So that was my exposure to David Montgomery. That was my exposure to Michael Thomas. And that was my exposure to Rhett Ellison. So on the main slate, I tried to get a little bit different. Kind of blew up in my face a little bit. But I guess talk a little bit about your morning and how you reacted to the news with Damien. And I guess fading Christian McCaffrey as well in order to get up to some of these other plays.
Yeah, so going in on Sunday morning, quarterback was down to Lamar for me. And I see the chat just asked why I didn't stack Lamar.
Mm-hmm.
In cash, I don't really care. And with someone like Lamar who runs as much as he does, I'm not worried about stacking him even in GPPs for the most part. So, yeah, stacking Lamar, like, I never even considered it because none of the people to stack.
I think what they meant was why wouldn't you have just played Mahomes at that point since you're already playing Damien and Watkins just because it's cash and you know you're getting a lot more on the ground from Lamar type of thing?
Correct, yeah. And like I considered Mahomes for a smidge,
Sure.
but Lamar's rushing stats are just too much better. So for me, quarterback was Lamar or Tannehill for the most part. And I talked about Jeff Driscoll with you. I think I might have actually led you to Driscoll a bit. But for me, it was pretty much going to be Lamar or Tannehill. And then at running back, it was Montgomery. It was Ronald Jones, who I hated going into the day.
Let me talk about Ronald Jones, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I was between them, and then it was like Jalen Samuels, Saquon Barkley, and Christian McCaffrey. Receiver, I was playing Michael Thomas. He was locked in for me. I was playing Christian Kirk. He was locked in for me. The second wide receiver spot was between either like Godwin, Sammy, Curtis Samuel, or DJ Moore. And then tight end was either Ellison or Gesicki. No one else was there. Defense was either Browns or Cardinals for me, and that was pretty much my entire player pool until the Damian news came out. As soon as Damian news got announced, obviously he turned into an easy lock. And I wasn't really going to play Ronald Jones because I don't think he's very good. I don't really like the offense. I don't really like anything about that situation. Dario Ogunbowale is really solid in the passing game. So I thought you'd look at like Jones splits carries with Barber, and then Ogunbowale gets all the passing downs. It obviously didn't happen like that. But that's sort of what I figured. So once we got the news with Damian Williams, I was very set on playing Saquon. And here's the thing with me. Obviously, as a PSU fan, I don't need to get heavily talked into Penn State players. Yeah. That said, I won't homer them if they're bad plays. If they're bad plays, I won't even consider them. I think you can attest to that, Joe.
That's very true. You're pretty good at you're probably better than me at working through some of those biases. I'll admit that.
Yeah, like with Penn State guys, like I love to play them. If they're a good play, I'll play them. If they're not, I'm not going to really consider them. So it didn't take me very long to lock in on Saquon because I thought Saquon was such a strong play yesterday. And once you got the Damian news, it was not difficult to fit him in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the whole Christian McCaffrey thing at 10-5, like to me, I was still prioritizing getting him in if I had to make a few like decision points. Like we talked about quarterback a little bit. Like I think every single show, like it was pretty clear Lamar was the play. And if you wanted to get a little bit different, Patrick Mahomes was underpriced. I mean, just coming back from injury, like I loved both those guys. I preferred the roster construction last week with playing Tannehill, and I still liked the matchup for him. I liked the fact that he was going to give us a little bit on the ground. But what I liked the most about Tannehill is there was some pretty clear options to pair with him, which we'll talk about once we get to my team. So I was playing Christian McCaffrey. I didn't want to play Montgomery and Damian Williams. Like I said, full disclosure, I did play David Montgomery on the early only slate, which I had a decent amount of action on as well. Damian to me felt like a better play, better offense. He's more active in the passing game. It wasn't a situation where, like, when it comes down to it, trust the running back with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, not Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback. Like for me, that was like one of the main points. Like just because, like I get it, Stafford's out, maybe Montgomery. I'm not trying to even poke a ton of holes in the Montgomery play. Like let's bring it over to the spreadsheet because this is kind of like part of my thought process has to do with this right here. So again, David Montgomery 5,300. I had him projected for like 22, 23 touches or so. I mean, at that point, he was my favorite guy just based on touches alone. I ended up kind of scaling up this projection for Damien Williams. Obviously, this was a pre-projection after the McCoy news. So I think I had Damien in a kind of the same kind of range, probably a little bit lower than Montgomery actually. But I was felt a little bit more comfortable with the offense and with the passing involvement there. So both of those guys I thought were really good plays. I thought that both of them were totally fine if that's where you landed. Okay, but Ronald Jones, 4,300. Okay, you need to save a little money on this slate. Like, I totally recognize that. I had him projected for less than 2 catches. He hasn't had more than 3 catches, I believe, in his entire career. He caught like 8 balls. So if that's going to be what buries me and these Ronald Jones people want to do a victory lap, they can go right ahead. I get it. The game environment, here's the arguments in favor of Ronald Jones. Strong game environment. We know there's going to be a ton of plays against Arizona. Fine. Do you think that Ronald Jones is going to have more receptions than Evans or Godwin in a game literally ever? I don't. So I wasn't really on Ronald Jones. I was trying to get to Godwin, which we'll talk about. The team total was nice. I understand all of that, but it's a timeshare situation. We saw it. He didn't even he had a great game, but he still got vultured at the goal line for one of those touchdowns, or he could have had just a slate breaking type of performance. So if I missed out on the Ronald Jones play, that's fine. It's not that I didn't think he was in play. Like clearly, like his price and still projecting him for a decent amount of touches, he was at least in play. I just preferred Montgomery and Damien Williams. I guess, did you consider Ronald Jones? I still saw a decent amount of sharp people playing him. Maybe it was just because of that extra salary, that extra 1K that you got off of Montgomery. But for me, I was never going to pull the trigger on that on a main team.
I still considered him, but I think I considered him less than most of the people I talked to on Sundays. If you look at a lot of other people, I think they ran the 3 cheaper options. They ran Jalen Samuels, Ronald Jones, and Damien Williams. Or I'm sorry, they ran Damien Williams, David Montgomery, and Ronald Jones. That's what people did. And they did that because they wanted to make sure they got the tight end they wanted, the defense they wanted, and they wanted to pay up the second-time receiver. So I don't think Ronald Jones is bad. I have no issues with the Ronald Jones play. I'll give a little disclaimer here. Davis Maddock was slurping Ronald Jones so much on Sunday, and he was like, I can't change my lineup at all. I need to play Ronald Jones, which is just ridiculous. So he was saying that in our chat, and everyone was just berating for it. And Davis is usually always wrong, no matter what. So,
at the same time, he probably gets better cash action than anyone because people are sending him head-to-heads constantly, right?
100%. He literally said this week he gets 23 $500+ head-to-heads every week because everyone thinks he's a donkey. Which
I actually don't think Davis is a donkey, to be honest. I think if that's his shtick that gets him better games, I think that's beyond next level smart, to be honest.
No, he is a donkey. Don't get me wrong, he is, but he's also not. He's not as bad as a giant fish. He's not that bad, but he is. I've said this about Davis a lot. Davis's biggest asset in making DFS lineups is that he's a really big beta.
Okay.
He will be in chat and he will come in hard selling a play. So he'll come in on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m. and be like, Ronald Jones can't not play him. I'm going to play him. And then 5 or 6 people that are good at DFS are like, no, that's just moronic. They didn't say it this week. This was this is a normal situation. And they're like, no, you can't play Ronald Jones. That's an absolutely idiotic play. Within 35 minutes, Davis is like, yeah, Ronald Jones, that play is so bad. And anyone that makes it's a moron. So like Davis's biggest asset is that he is actually willing to listen to people that are smarter than him and will not make as many dumb plays because he is not as stubborn as most people. That is his biggest asset, is making a DFS lineup.
That's fair. I can appreciate a guy that comes hot into that chat in particular with something, some type of take at least. But I would appreciate, I mean, if anyone that starts kind of throwing Davis games, like maybe I'll start playing cash, because I heard that he got some pretty nice action this week. So let's talk about my team a little bit now. So again, I do not play cash games. This is not a cash game build from the start. This is something that I talk about every single week. I like to play or build what I think is optimal first, and then make one of two decisions. Either I'm going to try and do a unique correlation, or I want to flip roster construction, do things a little bit differently in that build. So my team, poor performance. I think 110 teams. I'm all the way down to 93rd. Shout out to me. Ryan Tannehill, I've talked about him. I like them quite a bit. Just again in the spot against Kansas City. I like the idea of playing a quarterback on the other side of a game that I think is going to have some points scored. Obviously, we were all over that. AJ Brown was someone that was popping into a lot of optimals this week. I think that his price and the target share that opened up, I thought that he would kind of get there at 4,300 for sure. And obviously, it was a clear kind of correlation play with Ryan Tannehill. Adam Humphries. So basically, this is kind of where my morning started to change a little bit, because Damian Williams kind of gave me a really easy correlation play on the other side of my Tannehill stacks, which was great, because I was considering playing Sammy Watkins at one point in that same kind of range as Christian Kirk. The bad part about Damian Williams is now I had a clear path to getting to Chris Godwin, who I really liked. I mentioned that I played Michael Thomas on early only, so I felt like if I was going to fade him in a tournament, a lot of leverage there if he doesn't get in the end zone. Turns out there was just so many good wide receiver plays this week. Not a ton of great running back plays this week, so didn't quite end up mattering there. But AJ Brown, Humphries brought it back with Damian Williams. So started with a pretty main stack, trying to add a little bit more correlation than I have in the past, because I think that if I've made a mistake in this tournament this year, last year, the tournament was only like 50 to 60 people when it was a $1,000 game changer, and they bumped it up pretty significantly. I mean, I like the structure of it a lot more, because at least you're getting a 2x min cash now. But at the same time, 110 people in my eyes is a little bit different. So I'm trying to correlate a little bit more than I have. Mentioned that I was playing Christian McCaffrey. Saw a ton of people actually that didn't play Christian McCaffrey in the flex, which I think is completely absurd. But Saquon Barkley, like I mentioned, I thought that he was in a great spot. Obviously, he gets hurt, which isn't great, but he didn't even do a whole lot before that. So tough to eat that one with Saquon, because that's part of this lineup, at least that was somewhat unique. Was just trying to pay up for two running backs, and that's what I mean by trying to flip roster construction on its head a little bit. And when everyone was pretty much paying down for Damian and for Montgomery, I wanted to get up for two of these guys this week. So that was kind of the decision I made that didn't work out. My decision between Rhett Ellison and Mike Gesicki. I mean, I told you, I think right when I got off stream, I was like, one of these guys is probably the play. They're both probably really thin, but with the plays that we had, like I said, a wide receiver, like you had to pay down a tight end, in my opinion. Gesicki, just at least he has a ceiling. Rhett Ellison, like at that point, like he was stone min. So if you wanted to go with that, it still made total sense to me with the injuries that they had. I had a tournament team that had Danny Dimes, Saquon, actually believe had Tate and Ellison, didn't have Slayton. So RIP that team. But I think that the thought process was just paying all the way down to stone min for a guy that we could project for, project for 4 or 5 targets in that spot wasn't the worst in that slate in particular. The Cardinals is where I guess I was a little bit unique. So I want to talk a little bit about the Cardinals spot quickly, just because I think I was on a little bit of an island here, but this is kind of how I got here. So 2,200 for a team that I get it. They're on the road. They're not a favorite. Typically would avoid something like that, but I love to attack these games where there's going to be a lot of passing plays. So attacking Jameis, he'll make mistakes as far as the interceptions, the turnovers. He does take sacks a decent amount. I love attacking Jameis because he's just going to fire downfield. Another part of this that made a lot of sense to me, Tampa Bay's offensive line isn't that great. And the Cardinals have actually been pressuring a decent amount. So I get some great data from Sports Info Solutions every week about pressure rates for defensive lines and what offensive lines are giving up a ton of pressure. And the Cardinals actually right behind Pittsburgh and New Orleans as two of the teams that pressure a ton. So I loved Pittsburgh. I couldn't get to them kind of on this build. In hindsight, sure, that would have been great. Attack Goff on the road never feels bad. But I loved Arizona 2,200. That's how I went there. The optimal for at least most people was Cleveland. What defense did you end up playing, Sean? I forget.
I played Cleveland on both sites in Maine. I think I played the Bears and early only on one site.
Okay. Yeah, so Cleveland was strong, 2,500 against Josh Allen, another team that pressures a good amount. I didn't like that game environment as much. I didn't have it projected for near as many plays, near as many pass attempts. So that was, I guess, my wrinkle with Cleveland. So I guess prefer to pay down to Arizona. So like when I say I want to get unique in roster construction, it's all of those things. But I almost always try and get a high pressure defense at lower ownership, because those are the weeks where you can really pass people. Earlier in the season, I believe it was Tampa Bay. That was extremely low owned, and there's another pressure defense that kind of helps me vault up into the top 5 of one of the first weeks of the season. So that was great. Outside of that, yeah, maybe Humphreys ran pretty good getting that touchdown. He wasn't near as involved as I thought, but Tannehill just didn't really throw a lot. I think he threw 17 times in this game, which isn't ideal. I just thought that with the game script where it was, I guess I didn't bake in enough of what Henry would do to this game. Sure, it was a great matchup. Derrick Henry, 6,400 was fine. Just I never considered him once. It's a good matchup against KC, but let's not forget the week before, KC did pretty well at bottling up Dalvin Cook. So I was never playing Derrick Henry, but probably should have baked in a little bit more to the fact that he could have ruined this game script a little bit if he did pop off for a couple long runs and touchdowns. So Tannehill not throwing a ton wasn't great. Still got 37 rushing yards through 2 touchdowns. Like, it could have been worse, I think, from that perspective. But really, like, Saquon just getting 1 point in this spot wasn't good by any means. So, yeah, anything else that stand out about this team, Sean? I don't know if there was really a whole lot more kind of to say about it. Obviously, Saquon still gave me a couple catches at least, but that 1 rushing yard was just beyond tilting.
Yeah, it's actually the fact that Saquon had 8 points and they scored 27 as a team is a joke. And the fact that he had 15 carries and outrushed me by 1 yard is also a joke. Actually, your lineup is more chalky this week than I feel like it usually is.
Yeah, I think, okay, so the one thing I haven't talked about yet, and I'll get your take on this as well, Christian Kirk. So Christian Kirk was probably one of my favorite wide receivers the entire week. I was not alone on that. He was someone that was popping in all the things that I really value, weighted opportunity rating. He was top 8 in that, and he was 5,200 in probably one of the best matchups that there possibly could be. Tampa Bay is very good against the run. We know there's going to be pass attempts. Like, Christian Kirk at 5,200 was an unbelievable play. It wasn't that I was actively trying to fade him, but when Damian opened up, I was able to get up from him to Godwin, which I thought was optimal at the time. Clearly, Godwin's another guy that ran a little bit bad in this week in particular. Like, Godwin still got a ton of air yards in the spot, a pretty decent sized target share as well. Mike Evans, just clearly the alpha in that offense. It was expensive. Both these guys were expensive. So Chris, I probably at that point should have just made something with Michael Thomas work. But I guess Christian Kirk or no Christian Kirk, you weren't winning anything big if you didn't have him. So yeah, go ahead. I guess it was a little bit chalkier than I typically do in something like this outside of the Tannehill stack, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't think it was necessarily. Well, I guess it was semi-chalky just because no one's going to be super chalky. Yeah, I mean, it was just a weird week, right? We were talking about it earlier, and everyone stunk. There was literally one play on the slate that was a difference maker, and it was Christian Kirk. If you had Christian Kirk, you did okay to possibly smash. If you did not have Christian Kirk, you had no chance. That was just the week. There was no one else that did anything. I mean, you even look at quarterback. Lamar was QB1. I think, I'm not positive on that, but he had 33 points. He beat Tannehill by 13. That's
didn't even play the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and Tannehill threw the ball like 17 times.
Yeah.
So that's just not a slate-breaking situation, right?
Breeze, Rodgers, none of these guys even throw a touchdown. It was insane.
No, exactly. Everyone was a dud. Like Saquon, dud. Like CMC, that's pretty much his floor. If he didn't get that touchdown in the fourth quarter or like the 100 yards bonus, all of a sudden he's at 20.
To be fair, I think he scored at the end of the game, but that's neither here nor there. I was already so dead at that point. I wasn't really watching my team, but.
No, yeah, exactly. But like, yeah, you look at everyone like Michael Thomas pretty much hit his floor. Godwin hit his floor. Like I had Sammy Watkins. Sammy Watkins had 10 targets and 3 carries and had 9 points. Like floor. Like AJ Brown, floor. Humphreys, 1 catch. I mean, he sort of got a little bit lucky, but like
sure.
Ellison, Gesicki, Damian Williams. I think Damian Williams pretty much hit his floor here.
That's the guy that could have broke this thing wide open. Like everyone's doing their kind of victory lap for Ronald Jones. Like, I don't know. I still think that Damian, he ended up touching the ball like 24 times in this spot. I would play that 100 out of 100 times.
Yeah, Damien Williams, like I think pretty much every player hit their floor. And someone asked earlier why Kirk was locked. Joe alluded to like why he was locked. Joe just ended up moving off him because
show the people. Yeah, so 5,200. I mean, so we're looking at this, like the spot against Tampa Bay, it's still decent total. The game environment was very strong. We don't even need to talk about that anymore. But this, I mean, target market share and the air yards market share baked into one metric, weighted opportunity rating. We do have airyards.com back, by the way. Thank God. That would have been a disaster. But yeah, top 8 in that. He's just underpriced. Like, it's one of the things that you can like use right away to really just find some guys that are probably underpriced. The Carolina guys are popping in here very frequently. Looking at something like yards per route run, you'll always kind of get some outside of some of these guys with small samples at the top. These are where you'll get your Michael Thomases, your Tyreke Hills, those type of guys. So, but yeah, you can continue on Christian Kirk. But I still thought, I mean, he was a very good play. But if you're gonna fade a guy, and you're at my strategy is almost always to fade a higher owned wide receiver.
Yeah, and I mean, fading wide receivers is generally where you do, and we talk about, right, like. There was a very slim once Damien got announced, especially. I don't think you were ever not going to play Saquon and McCaffrey.
No chance, yeah.
And if you played Saquon, you're not going to do very much anyways. You could have been okay, I guess. Like I cashed double up with a total disaster lineup. I just had Kirk, so I was able to cash 50-50s and a lot of my head-to-heads. So I was able to break even because of Kirk. You remove Kirk from my team, I have no chance. But yeah, apparently Red Ellison got concussed as well. I gave up on the slate. I'll be honest. I gave up on the slate at like 2 p.m.
I thought you were dead, to be honest. And then I didn't realize you didn't have Kirk, or that you did have Kirk, and then it brought you all the way back. That's great, at least.
Yeah, so I had Kirk. So I gave up on the slate before Kirk had more than 1 for 8. I gave up. And even when Kirk went off, I'm like, I'm still dust because David Montgomery stinks. Damian Williams is hitting his floor.
Saquon's hurt.
Sammy Watkins stinks. Red Ellison stinks. Saquon Barkley stinks.
That's the thing. So nothing happened, dude. This whole slate, like nothing really happened outside of a couple really big games.
Totally. Like going into the 4:00 games, I'm like, I'm losing every cent, and then literally everyone continued to hit their floors even at the 4:00 games. It was a wild week where literally nothing. Like you look at my lineup, I have Lamar, Kirk, and Thomas, and then total dust.
Yeah.
And I was still able, and Thomas is irrelevant because everyone played Thomas for the most part.
Was Sammy Watkins super contrarian in cash games? I thought he was a pretty good play. I don't know if I would have landed on him, but I mean, your roster construction after you faded CMC, you basically had all the salary in the world to get up to some of these guys.
Correct, and it was like I said, for me, it was the decisions I ended up getting down to because I pretty much locked myself in on Saquon was Gesicki or Ellison, Sammy, DJ Moore, or Curtis Samuel, depending on where I went at quarterback. And then Browns or Cardinals defense, and then Lamar or Tannehill. Those were pretty much the decisions I was toying.
You didn't even need Tannehill at that point, though, so that worked out for you.
Correct. And if I played Tannehill was going to be to upgrade Sammy's spot to Chris Godwin. That was going to be so. Like those were the 8 players I was debating between 5 spots based on whoever worked best.
Gotcha. Let's talk a little bit about some of these questions we had in the chat. Someone was talking about how the Steelers were drastically underpriced. I'm with you, man. I wish I would have given the Steelers, or at least given some rosters some more looks that would have gotten me up just a few $100s to get to the Steelers. I was kind of locked into the Cardinals, and I do this sometimes with defenses, especially the cheap ones, if I think that they're an especially strong play that'll be lower owned. I kind of agree with you, Nate, in the chat that I thought the Steelers would be heavily owned. They didn't end up being as heavily owned as I originally thought. So that was interesting. Doozy was talking about how Michael Thomas was stopped at the 1. That was huge. In particular, our boy Nevs in the gridiron bubbled the thing, I think, by like 2 or 3 points. Michael Thomas gets in there. I think he cashes it. So that was a pretty brutal beat. But yeah, anything else as far as your team and kind of the cash game streets this week? I know FanDuel was kind of a weird week, but in particular, this one, I think that you had a pretty popular build for cash games in particular. I guess I want to get your take on Christian McCaffrey, though, because I'm extremely biased in this. I guess I've played him every single week, I think, that he's been on the slate. You did have some salary here. So was there, I guess you were kind of locked on Saquon at that point, and I know you're never fading Montgomery and Damian Williams. So at that point, you probably just liked your roster a little bit better with Saquon at that point, I'm guessing.
Well, it was Saquon, and so I think Saquon is close enough to McCaffrey normally that they're going to get similar point values. 10.2 is really, really high. I did consider my other option was Saquon. If I did that, I did consider him.
Okay.
It was Saquon and Sammy Watkins versus Humphrey and CMC.
Gotcha.
That was the decision I had there. I really like Sammy's upside. If you told me Sammy was 4%, I'm loving it. He had one bad drop too. That was like a 25-yard gift where he had a 1v1 to score on either like a 70-yard touchdown or at worst a 25-yard catch. And Mahomes made a bad throw, and he still should have caught it, but made a bad drop. So, like I said, that third receiver, if I went that way, was going to be my least chalky play, my most important player of the day. And then I needed Ellison to beat Gesicki or stay with Gesicki. I was a little bit worried about that because Gesicki I thought had higher upside than Ellison, but I thought they were both going to get 4 to 6 targets, so I just decided to save my 600 there instead of elsewhere. But for the most part, I thought that these guys were really solid. And I thought I had higher upside with the receivers at the 5K range. Like I thought DJ Moore had really good upside, and I thought Sammy Watkins had really good upside, and I thought they both had really good floors. Like Sammy's floor was 10. This was his floor.
Right.
His upside was easily 25 or 30. They threw all over him. So I thought that I liked the upside going with that option better than I did with changing it around a little bit. And that's why I didn't end up with like Curtis Samuel. I thought Sammy and DJ Moore had better chances than him.
Nate in the chat just dropping some absolute knowledge. Appreciate you being here, bro. He was talking about how KC's tough against pass games just because they're trying to keep Mahomes off the field. I think that makes a ton of sense. I probably should have considered that a little bit more. At that point, I just really like that stack that I had with Tanny and then bringing it back with Damian. I guess there's one thing that I kind of want your take on, Sean. Tyreke Hill, I like never considered this guy. And I think that I just have kind of a weird mental block with him. But if we're just looking at his air yards, like 237 air yards in the spot, right behind Christian Kirk, Odell, Amari Cooper, Gallup. But just looking at my spreadsheet, like he's still like he was second in weighted opportunity. He had a massive total. I mean, against Tennessee, like they may be going to slow things down a little bit, but like, why do I just block Tyreke Hill out of my head? He's getting like all these like layup throws these days that I don't know. Maybe I need to like start kind of or at least revisit what type of player he is from a DFS perspective. What do you think about Tyreke? I never considered playing him over Michael Thomas, over Godwin, but maybe I should have.
No, I mean, he was unreal in that game. I watched that game for the first 2 quarters before I gave up on the day. He was electric. Every pass to him, like you said, a lot of high percentage throws that he's going to catch. So his floor is decently high because of those. Yeah. And the amount of times he was tearing like a 2-yard catch into like 15 out of nowhere that no one else in the league is doing was very impressive. So yeah, no, I mean, totally. The issue for me was, and I didn't consider him. And the reason I didn't consider him is because I thought Sammy was just as good at 5,200 because the way that they usually work is like one of them goes nuts, the other one doesn't really go nuts.
Right.
And they have floors. So for me, I was never not playing Michael Thomas. He's just too consistent right now to not play. And then I would have played Godwin or Evans before I played Tyreke. So I wasn't going to get to him. But I mean, watching that game, I mean, he had 19 targets and he was really, really, really good in that game.
Nuts, man. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of want to revisit the Tyreke thing, at least mentally. Davante Adams, so I get it. Like he was number 1 in weighted opportunity, but that's also a much smaller sample because he's been injured. But 6,900, that should have stood out, I think, a little bit more than I kind of let it. I do respect Carolina's defense quite a bit, but Davante Adams in this spot at 6,900, I think that a lot of sharp people played Davante Adams as kind of a one-off, maybe just kind of a little bit of a pivot off of the Tampa Bay guys. But if any one of these guys were like underpriced, like I think he's the one that probably should have like kind of at least stood out a little bit more. So I liked him quite a bit. Cooper Kupp at 7,300. I get it if he was kind of like a late swap type of guy for me. If you swap to Cooper Kupp, obviously that didn't end up too well for you. Julio Jones, I don't think I've played Julio in over a year. Just he always seems like a guy that's hard to justify, but he's still kind of in that mid range of these elite priced guys. But Michael Thomas, like you said, at 8,300 was pretty much a kind of a layup at that point. But it was an interesting week, man. I want to go a little bit shorter today, but I do think that it was an interesting spot. Obviously, my team didn't quite get there. I didn't really even have a lot of pivot options. Like I said, I considered just pivoting off of Christian McCaffrey at that point to someone like Cooper Kupp. There really wasn't any other tight end plays. I guess that was a big problem. Like there was like no tight end plays. The running back plays weren't great. And when the running back plays weren't great, so my early only team that I was mentioning, I should have brought that up, but So I had Michael Thomas, I had David Montgomery in that team, but I liked the idea of playing Kamara, playing Saquon, like these guys that like no one was going to build a roster that way last week because a lot of these like kind of mid-tier wide receivers just weren't as strong as some of the elite ones too. So everyone was trying to save salary in that spot. At that point, maybe it just would have made sense to mess around with some Kelsey roster constructions. But did you ever consider a Kelsey team this week, or at that point, like were you kind of on the same page? You just had to get up to Michael Thomas.
Yeah, no, I didn't have anyone but Gesicki or Ellison at all. Those are the only two guys I considered. I did actually have Davante Adams before the news broke on Damian Williams. I had Davante Adams, but after the news broke on Davante Adams, he didn't fit in any of my builds, and I wasn't. I mean, he was a good play, but I wasn't sold on like forcing him in. But I did have him for a while before that. But yeah, no, for me, I was either Gesicki or Ellison. There was really no other debate there.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap this a little bit earlier today. I do think that appreciate everyone that kind of stuck around after Al's stream. Thanks again for the raid, Al. Make sure you guys are checking out all the awesome stuff Al's doing on YouTube. If you're in the NBA streets, I know he's doing a bunch of stuff over there for that as well. Thanks again, Pat Bain, for those 20 gifted subs. Always want to remind you guys, too, that if you have an Amazon Prime account, make sure you're taking advantage of that free Twitch subscription. If you want to learn more about how to be a profitable DFS player, start now by hitting the subscribe icon in the bottom right-hand corner. Be on the lookout for my first looks that will be out tomorrow. We are going to be doing them live on stream, twitch.tv/Joe Holka at 3 p.m. Eastern time. I'll see you guys there.